The chair for the VIP Distinguished Speaker Series. The VIP Distinguished Speaker Series is one of the many programs put on by the Undergraduate Business Council for the Red McCombs Business School. Today we are joined by Dean Gilligan and Mr. David Williams, President and CEO of MakeAWish. We will begin tonight with an interview between Dean Gilligan and Mr. Williams. Then we open the floor to a Q&A to the audience. As a reminder, today's event will end promptly at 6:30. We would greatly appreciate it if you would not use electronic devices during this time and that you do not leave early. Mr. Williams, as the President and Chief Executive Officer, leads the nation's staff and 61 chapters of MakeAWish in a simple, heartfelt mission, granting the wish of children with life-threatening medical conditions to enrich the human experience with hope, strength, and joy. Since 1980, the organization has granted MakeAWish to more than 250,000 children in the United States. Mr. Williams joined the foundation in January 2005. Under his leadership, the national office has annual revenue has more than doubled since 2004. Before joining MakeAWish, Mr. Williams spent 11 years at the Habitat for Humanity International, rising to be Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer. Mr. Williams began his work in nonprofit leadership by serving as Executive Director to the Houston Food Bank for 11 years. Mr. Williams has earned his bachelor's degree in the Business Administration from Bloomsburg University and a master's degree in Business Administration from the University of Houston. Please help me welcome Dean Gilligan and Mr. Williams.
Well, thanks, Dave. Thanks for joining us.
It's great to be here. Great to be back in Texas.
Back in Texas. You grew up in Texas, I take it.
You know, I lived here for 13 years.
Well, that counts, I think.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Yeah.
It's great to come back, and hopefully I'll get some good barbecue tonight.
Yeah, great. I want to ask you a couple questions about you personally. And, you know, one thing I thought that was striking from your resume was that it looks like you had a very traditional for-profit business education, a BBA and an MBA, and yet your whole career was spent more or less in the nonprofit sector. Very distinguished, by the way, the COO of Habitat for Humanity, which everybody knows about, the food bank leadership. That's incredible. How did you end up in the not-for-profit sector?
Right. So I was an accounting major in undergrad, and I was, you know, it was one of those things where I thought I was going to be a math major, and then I got to my third course in some kind of calculus, and it was way out there, and I couldn't understand it. But I kind of fell into accounting. I don't know how many of you remember the movie The Graduate, and it was that question, you know, what's one word? And in the movie, it was plastics. But at my high school graduation, the one word from this relative was accounting, that the world was always going to need accountants. And so that's how I ultimately became an accountant. But at the Shell Oil Company in Houston, I found that I just didn't have a passion for it. But what I did have a passion for were the nonprofit organizations that I was volunteering with. Yeah. And the other part of it was that she wasn't my wife at the time, but she became one later. But she was my supervisor, and we both found that accounting was not the thing that I was very good at.
You were fired by your wife?
Well, no. I quit before I got fired. And Leslie Motter is here. She's our head of human resources, and she knows my wife, and she knows she would have done that. Yeah,
she's tough. Yeah,
she's tough. Right. So instead, we've been married for 30 years. So she hasn't fired me yet.
That's outstanding. Let's go back even before college. I mean, talk to us about your early ages. What were your first jobs, and where do you think you developed the passion for the nonprofit sector?
Yeah, so I was talking with some of the students earlier about some of my first jobs. My one grandfather was a milkman, and we were actually on his route, and so he would pick me up towards the end of his route, and I would help him deliver milk. And I thought it was the greatest job in the world. He stood when he drove the truck, and I think if somebody had come along at the time and said, "You can do this for the rest of your life," I think I would have said yeah. And then my other grandfather was a coal miner, and tough guy, and I would do a lot of work with him on a farm that we had. And so I think early on, and as I think about a lot of the different jobs that I had in terms of being a busboy or a dishwasher or a cook, or I was telling some of the students earlier about being my experiences as a security guard, those were jobs that actually kept me in college and paying attention in class, because they were good jobs when you were young, but it's a tough way to make a living. And
No future there.
So I think it was, I got involved even in high school in just different types of nonprofit organizations, and found that was very interesting to me. In college, actually, it was I became more serious about my faith. And as I read more of what the Bible had to say about caring for those least fortunate in our world, it became pretty clear to me that we all have an obligation to just not be about our own lives. And so I think the combination of that and some of the joy that I received from volunteering made me a lot more open to the nonprofit sector.
Interesting. What now? Your career has been stunning with those leadership roles in these world prominent nonprofit organizations. What do you think it was about you that set you apart from your peers to get selected to be the COO for Habitat and the director of the MakeAWish Foundation?
Yeah, that one grandfather I was telling you about, who's a milkman. He was a terrible milkman, and he would tell you that. And the reason was because he always, everybody else would get in at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. He wouldn't get in until 4 or 4:30. But I remember him telling me that very often he was the only, there were a lot of elderly homebound people on his route. And a lot of times he was the only person that those folks would see during the course of their day. And so he spent a lot of time just listening. And I think that was one of the lessons that I learned, was the importance of being a good listener. And actually, as I think about the jobs that I've had, listening is a big part of it. A lot of times the answers are there. You just have to, sometimes we have the impression of leadership that it's all about, command and control and directing and telling people what to do, and there's certainly, an aspect to that. But I find that, listening is a skill that sometimes we just don't think is all that important, and I think it's very important. And so I would say that was a lesson I learned early on from one of my grandfathers.
And that served you well over your career.
It has. I think it has. When I was at Habitat, I was the chief operating officer, and that was that was probably the hardest job that I've had, in that I reported to the founder of Habitat, who was your entrepreneurial, type A, visionary, had 50 ideas, and 2 of them were brilliant, but it was trying to figure out which the 2 were that were brilliant, and then trying to figure out how to not necessarily do the other ones. But it was, we had a saying that Millard had the vision and I had the nightmare, because some of it was just the executing part. But again, it was a position that involved, I thought, a lot of listening to be able to execute well. You've got to get the buy-in of more than just one person.
Yeah. Were you born with this skill to listen, or is it something you actively worked on and developed over your life?
So I think some of it was my parents are both very quiet, introverted people, and so I never really realized it that much until I kind of got out a little bit. And so yeah, I think there was a little bit that was in there. And then afterwards, I think it was the one thing with all the jobs, really the Make-A-Wish position is the only one that I think I was ever qualified for. When I started with the Houston Food Bank, and maybe we'll talk about that more later on, I certainly was not. And when I became, when I was with Habitat for Humanity, there were so many reasons why I was not qualified for that. So I actually, at an early age, were put into positions that not only was I not the smartest person in the room, I wasn't even close to being the smartest person in the room. And so I had to listen, because that was the only way that we were going to be successful.
Well, this probably brings me naturally to my next question, right? What are some of the biggest mistakes you've made over your career?
Yeah, boy, there have been some big ones. I think some of the more humorous ones were when I was doing some public speaking and not really being prepared for what for the venue in which I was going in. And so one of the first ones was speaking at an African American church in the kind of inner city of Houston, and I had my speech all in front of me, only to find out that I was going to be speaking in a place that had nobody was using a podium. They had taken the pulpit and put it somewhere, and they had a city councilman get up and speak, and they had the senior pastor get up and speak. I mean, these guys were really good. And they didn't have a single note, and I mean, they talked for like 20 minutes. And so I'm sitting there, I mean, I'm literally thinking, I can't take these papers up here and read this talk. And so I started writing notes on my hands, but my hands were so sweaty that after a while it was just all, and so anyway, I somehow, got through it. And after I heard the first, like, keep going, brother, or keep preaching, or something like that, then I settled down and everything was okay.
Yeah.
But then the other one was, we were the recipient of a truck and tractor pull. Now, does anybody in here, have you ever been to a truck and tractor pull? So it was in the Houston Astrodome, and we were asked at the last minute to be the recipient, and I thought, okay, well, how many people go to a truck and tractor pull? Well, I got to the Astrodome, and it was packed. And so they had told me that I was going to give the introduction, and it was on ESPN and all this kind of stuff, and so I thought, okay, well, how hard is that? Well, my line was, welcome to the Ford Houston Food Bank Truck and Tractor Trailer Pool, sponsored by Duraliner. And see, I know that now, 30 years later. But at the time, so in front of 45,000 people who, I don't know how many of them were paying attention. It was pretty bad. And so, unfortunately, it was on ESPN, and too many of my friends saw it, and it was really bad. But I would say, in terms of serious mistakes, what I found and what I've really tried to work on is that I think growing up I was not very good at dealing with conflict. Very quiet household that we grew up in. The nonprofit sector tends to be a little conflict averse. We want to, we're MakeAWish. We want to be nice to each other, or we're Habitat or the food bank, and so sometimes you can get away with that, but in a leadership position, if you're not willing to deal with conflict, then you just shouldn't be there. Now, nobody likes conflict, but you have to be able to deal with it and deal with it in a good way. And so I think, as I look back on my career and I think of the mistakes that I've made, it was that, I knew there was a decision that had to be made, maybe around a person that was a bad fit. I didn't want to do it, and so I delayed it, and frankly, it usually does not get better, at least around personnel. And so I think some of the biggest mistakes were not doing something that I knew was going to be hard, but I knew it was the right thing in my gut, but I couldn't man up to do it. And in retrospect, looking back, it was like, good grief. We would have saved this organization a whole lot of time and grief if I had just, when I knew it was the right thing to do, just gone ahead and made the decision.
Yeah, interesting. Let's transition over to the not-for-profit sector. And I think everybody in here knows what MakeAWish Foundation is, probably, and Habitat for Humanity as well, I presume. But help us understand the contemporary environment of not-for-profits. And I want you to talk a little bit about the ALS challenge and your view of that, and kind of what lessons you take from that for branding challenges you face at MakeAWish.
Right. So first of all, how many people did the Ice Bucket Challenge? There were a few? Yeah. So I did as well, and I think the first thing is that, I don't know if you know how much money was raised from that, but it was $100 million, and it was, and I would say that it was certainly a very, kind of a viral. I mean, nobody had, I think, any inclination that it would have generated that amount of money. I don't think there was a goal to it, and if there was, it wouldn't have been anything close to that. But I think the lesson learned is, to me, very similar to something that we experienced a year ago with a little kid whose wish was to be Bat Kid, and I don't know how many of you saw that out in San Francisco. Again, a very simple idea, and yet in this world of social media, good grief, things can just really, really take off. And I think one of the lessons learned from both of those events is that, first of all, both events were very positive for both organizations. But to me, the lesson learned, and it was really after both of them that I started thinking, more the Bat Kid one, was, okay, we're very fortunate. It was a very positive experience. What if it hadn't been? Yeah. What if it had been very negative, and what would have been the repercussions to the organization if it had gone that viral and it was a negative story as opposed to a positive story. And so one of the things that we just did, and we have not had this in the past, is to actually retain a kind of a PR firm to just to be on call, to be on retainer, to help us to make sure that, you know, I mean, we deal with little things kind of, not every day, but, you know, every week, every month, but to really do everything we can to be prepared, because, you know, I remember when I started, the idea of, listen, you need to be ready for a crisis and an emergency, and you need to be able to respond in, you know, 48 hours, or you need to, well, heck, in 48 hours, you could be toast. I mean, you don't have that much time today with social media, and we have people on our staff, that's what they do. They monitor all different sites, and because it takes one wish. It takes one wish family that somehow something goes south. You have a parent that is not happy about something, and if it's the right circumstances, we could be in a world of hurt.
Big challenge. Interesting. You've been CEO of MakeAWish for 10 years now. So how has the organization evolved since you got there? What are some of the major strategic initiatives that you've put in place?
Right. So, you know, the first one was when I first got there, and this goes back to the listening piece. The first thing I thought was important was to try to listen, to meet as many different people as possible. And so it was meeting with staff, with board members, former board members, going throughout the country, meeting with our chapter leadership, and really just asking kind of the same series of questions. You know, what are we doing well? What are we not doing well? What do you hope I won't change? What do you think we should change? And so after really about 90 days of a lot of listening, I kind of developed it was about a year and a half game plan. And it was kind of under the theme of a phrase that it's been used before, but it felt very appropriate for us, and that was the power of one. And the idea was that at the time, we had 73 chapters around the country, and we have international affiliates in 38 countries around the world. And as you talk to people, they were, you know, they were excited about their chapter, or they were excited about their department or their country, but boy, they had issues with the national office or with their neighboring chapter or with whatever. And so their world was their chapter or their affiliate or their department. And so my message to the organization was, look, you know, we have 73 distinct 501c3 organizations just in this country. And so we think we're 73 organizations. But I'm telling you, out there, they don't care whether we're 73 chapters or 730 chapters. We're one organization. When people think of MakeAWish, they think of the MakeAWish Foundation. Right. And that's how we have to start thinking. We have to care as much about what happens over there as we do in our own place, and we have to start giving each other the benefit of the doubt and start acting like one organization. And so that's, I mean, it's one thing to give that speech. Right. It's another thing then to say, okay, how are we going to be better partners to each other? How as a national office, are we going to be better supportive of our chapters? How are chapters going to have a bigger view than just what happens in their Central and South Texas territory? Yeah. And so there are a number of initiatives that we did to try to bring together the organization. But that's one of the challenges of federation, is that we're not one organization. There are, in our case now, 62, am I doing that? There are 62 CEOs that are out there. Yeah. So I don't know, is it kind of like 62 deans?
It's very similar. Okay. Yeah.
And so that means you have to lead a lot by influence as opposed to, you know, because they report to different boards. Right. But yet we license them to be part of MakeAWish, and it's helping them see the benefit to them of being a more cohesive organization.
Yeah. What have been the most effective strategies for building cohesion amongst the 73 units?
Yeah, so for example, one of the things we did was just to say, look, if this is something that we want, what do we do to recognize it when it happens? And so, you know, things as simple as our most prestigious award now is the Power of One Award. And it's something that we give to a chapter who exhibits, and sometimes it's 2 chapters, 2 a year, but it's something that we say as an organization, this is important. This is really important that we're in the collaboration business. We're in the relationship business. I mean, we're Make-A-Wish, for Pete's sake. If we're about bringing joy into the lives of families that are going through tough times. If we can't bring joy into the lives of the people that we work with, then what are we doing?
Yeah.
And so I think it was as simple as that to really trying to drive that with some of our initiatives, some of our funding to get people to work more closely together.
I mean, I don't know the answer to this. The principal funding source for Make-A-Wish is individuals or corporations or foundations?
So it's very strong on the corporate and individual side.
Yeah,
So no government grants. Any kind of foundations that we would get would be family foundations.
Yeah.
So, you know, the Kellogg's or the Kresge or Rockefeller, they're dealing with social issues. We're not a
do you have your
big
cell phone
recipient.
Do you have your cell phone on?
Oh, I do. Maybe
Yeah, I
that's
turned
it.
mine off.
Thanks.
We collect cell phones from students before they go to class, so.
And so it's really individuals and corporations. And on the corporate side, it's mostly cause-related marketing where it's not necessarily philanthropy, it's a business deal.
Got it.
You know, people, we were talking about Maggiano's and people
let the students know about those examples. What are some of the most effective corporate partnerships that you have, and what do the corporations get out of that relationship?
Right. So we were talking earlier about two that are based here in Texas. So Maggiano's is an Italian restaurant, and what they do is they have a program called Eat a Dish for Make-A-Wish, and they take new menu items and they take dessert items and say, look, if you order that, then $1 or $2 will come to Make-A-Wish. Well, the business aspect to that is that they want you to try new menu items. They want you to eat dessert at Maggiano's, even when you've eaten more pasta and everything and you're taking it home. And so you're ordering something that you might not normally order, which is what they want. So you're achieving a business objective, and at the same time, it generates 7 figures for Make-A-Wish. And their employees are proud of it, their customers are, there's great brand alignment, and that really gets to the, one of the important aspects of a nonprofit organization is that you have to be mindful of your brand. On the corporate side, that is everything. A corporation, they're very mindful of their brand. They know what their brand is worth. And when they're aligning, especially if this is going to be a strategic thing where they're going to involve their employees and their customers, their vendors, then they want to align. They're not going to align with a nonprofit that's got a terrible brand or is just totally unknown. And so that's why one of our big jobs is to make sure that we protect that vigorously without apology and do everything we can to promote the brand and steward it.
Are you finding increasing or decreasing corporate interest in these kind of philanthropic activities?
Yeah, increasing.
Increasing.
Yeah, I think we're seeing the corporation, it's another way to be able to market the organization and to market it in a good way. More and more people are interested in corporations not just making money, but doing good things. And not just doing good things with their product, but serving society. I mean, we see, I'm sure you see this with students. Yeah. Students are interested in working for a corporation that does good things in the world. And so they're very mindful of it at a number of different levels. And so that's a good thing, but it's still incumbent upon us to be able to show the value of aligning with Make-A-Wish.
All right, got it. I'm going to give the students a warning. I'm going to ask a couple more questions, and then students can come down and ask questions too. And I guess we have mics in the middle. And if you guys could just tell us your name before you ask the question, that'd be great. These questions have more to do with advice you could give the students, right? So they're all aspiring leaders like yourself. What's the best piece of advice you were ever given?
The best piece of advice I was ever given. So I'll tell you what. I think what I'd like to maybe switch that a little bit is maybe give you the best questions I've ever been asked. Okay. So when I interviewed with the founder of Habitat for Humanity, he kind of threw me off. He had said, why do you want to work at Habitat? And what do you know about direct mail? Who's a big direct mail guy? And then he said, we have a phrase here in the South, what melts your butter? And I was like, come again? But it was what gets you out of bed at night? What gets you excited? Yeah. What are you passionate about? Kind of what melts your butter. And I think that's a question we should all ask ourselves. What is it that it excites you, especially at where you are in your career. You know, go back 100 years, people, you know, you didn't have the choice that you have now in terms of your vocation. You can choose anything you want to do. 100 years ago, you didn't. Your dad was a carpenter, you were going to be a carpenter. Or, you know, our female folks here, you weren't going to be doing, you were going to be a nurse or a teacher. Today, you can be anything that you want. And I would say even in the nonprofit sector, you can make a good living doing it. And so pick what you get excited about. Pick what melts your butter. Pick what you think is important and do that. There's no reason you should be, you're going to spend a lot of time looking at a computer screen or sitting behind a desk or in the workplace. And I will tell you that I come across too many people who are in jobs that they do it because they support their family. And there's nothing wrong with that. But where you are, you have the opportunity to do something that you feel passionate about. And so I would say that would be the first one. The second one was, the question is around what would you do if you knew you wouldn't fail? And so when I took the position with the Houston Food Bank, and I was explaining this earlier, that I was very young at the time. The food bank was in terrible shape, no food, no money, shut down by the City of Houston Health Department, kicked out of the National Food Bank Association. But the one question that I asked myself was, well, what worse could it be? and so, you know, the worst thing that could happen is, all right, I'm not very good at this, and then I go back to being a mediocre accountant. But I think a lot of times, the fear of failure can actually be a really good thing. I mean, honest to goodness, you know, I work really hard a lot of times because I don't want to fail. I want it to be a good board meeting. I want it to be a good presentation to a corporation. Failure is not a bad thing, but the reality is that we're all going to fail at some things, and that's not the worst thing in the world. It's what you do after you fail. And so first of all, what would you do if you knew you wouldn't fail? Because a lot of times, the fear of failure prevents us from doing that which we're excited about. But then the second one is, you know, what do you do after you fail? And the reality is that, you know, I fail every day in a lot of different things. The important thing is, you know, pick yourself back up and get after it. And I'm usually more impressed with what somebody does after they've failed than if everything's just going wonderful.
Yeah, which brings me to my next and last question before the students ask a question. When you interview people to fill positions, what characteristics stand out in your mind as being indicative of someone that you want on your team?
Yeah. So Leslie and I were talking about this when we were coming here, because we've been interviewing a number of different folks. You know, I usually ask a lot of questions that get to, you know, how they're where we are, where they are, and so I'm always interested in kind of even their education. How easy was it for them to get into school? What other things, you know, have they been working in other jobs or volunteered in other activities? The first question I always ask is, in our case, is why? I mean, not why this position, but why MakeAWish? And, you know, I mean, usually people will say, oh, well, you know, it's you know, I've always thought about, well, some people will be, you know, I've always thought about it, or I'm interested in the position. I'm looking for, is there a passion around what we do? We're a relational organization, and we're not, in our case, we're not doing brain surgery. I mean, we're just not. And so what's the differentiator for us? To me, it's, you know, do you have a passion for what we do? Because if you do, if you really care about what we do, then you know what, you're going to make that extra effort, whether you're in IT or finance or HR or wherever, to get it right. And you're going to make that extra effort to be a good colleague. And so I'm usually trying to get to the why are you interested?
Do they understand the mission,
Yeah.
the core purpose? Great. Please.
All right, so I'll start the questions, but if you have a question for Mr. Williams, feel free to step up to either mic and we'll go ahead and get it coordinated. But my first question, to just get it started, is if you could work for another nonprofit, which one would it be and why?
Oh, wow. That's good.
And we're being recorded here.
Yeah, we sure are. You know, I think, geez, you know, I love sports, and I don't know if I guess I could see something around that. But I think with all the positions that I've had, they've, you know, with the food bank, you're talking about a basic need of food, Habitat, a basic need of housing. MakeAWish, you know, you could kind of make the argument that it's not that basic, but actually it's a lot more important than you think it is. And so to me, I guess it's less about the, you know, which organization it would be. It would just be that it's got to be addressing what I think is a really important human need, and that it's tangible and one that, you know, at the end of the day you can say, boy, that really made a difference to somebody.
Please.
Mr. Williams, thank you for being here. My question is, if you were granted a wish, what would your wish be?
Oh boy, that's another hard one. I've been thinking about that.
Other than speaking in our VIP series.
Right, that's right. You know, I think I would. I think my wish would be that I would love to play cards, a card game with. I think it would be. You know, Bill Gates and Warren Buffett are two big bridge players, but I think those would be two of them, and probably, I don't know, Clinton and Bush, just to see the dynamics of all of them. I'd love to be in that environment to be able to do something like that.
Danny.
Hi, my name's Ryan Yanni. My question is, what is your favorite or a few of your favorite wishes that MakeAWish has granted?
Yeah, great question. You know, there's one that sticks out in my mind because it was happening when I was interviewing for the position. And so, first of all, to put it in context, I was involved with the Houston Food Bank and Habitat for Humanity as a volunteer before I joined their staff. So I knew, you know, what the organization was about. When I was approached about MakeAWish, I had no involvement with MakeAWish whatsoever, and so I was kind of concerned about that, and I didn't understand it that much, and so I was trying to get as much information as I could. But there was a wish that was going on at the time that was kind of playing out online and in the media, and it was about a young girl by the name of Hope Stout, who was a young girl in North Carolina, and so her initial wish was that she wanted to be famous. And so, yeah, it actually kind of ended up that way. But what happened is that she was a very precocious redhead. And she, when she learned that there were 155 kids on the waiting list in North Carolina, she said, okay, I'm changing my wish. My wish is that I want us to be able to raise the money for those 155 kids to have their wish granted. And everybody tried to talk her out of it. It's like, wait, this is supposed to be about you, number one. Number two, do you know how much money that is? That's millions of dollars. And to her credit, I mean, she was just this, again, fiery little girl. And she said, look, you told me I could wish for anything. That's my wish, and that's what we're going to do. Well, the long and the short of it is that the city of Charlotte came together, and they were able to raise those dollars. So on my third day on the job, I actually flew to Charlotte to the dinner that kind of celebrated that money had been made. Unfortunately, she had just passed away before it was done. And since then, I've had the opportunity to know her parents really well, and I just think to me, that's always going to be very special because, again, I was trying to evaluate the mission of the organization. And when that was going on, it kind of made me take a step back and say, holy moly, what? There's a little girl, she's fighting for her life. She could wish for anything in the world, and she wishes for something like this. Holy, I mean, that's, so that one will always be special to me.
Thank you.
Yep.
Please.
Hi, Mr. Williams. Thank you for being here today. My name is Miriam Petch, and I'm in a strategic corporate responsibility class this semester.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and so I kind of wanted to see what your opinion was on that, what kind of trends you're seeing, especially coming from the nonprofit world.
Yeah. So it's you know, and I would say it's been, it's been going on for a little while, but I would say most corporations now realize how important it is. And again, for a variety of reasons. One, it's just a smart way to market your company through your social efforts. It's smart because that's what your employees expect, it's what your customers expect. But what we're seeing is that corporations are just becoming much more strategic. And so it is not uncommon for us to get a call from a corporation and to say, look, we're reevaluating our corporate social responsibility. We've made a determination that there are 5 charities that we're interested in talking to. You're one of the 5. We'd like for you to come to our headquarters in a month and make a pitch on, if we were to align with MakeAWish, what would you be bringing to the table? And we're interested in, visits to our website. We're interested in engagement with our employees, and we're interested in driving these business objectives. And so it's sitting down and figuring that out, putting together essentially a sales deck and going and pitching a corporation on why, of all the charities out there, we're the ones that you should work with. And it's again, and some of it's very business oriented. We participate in different brand surveys, and so here's what Harris Interactive says about the MakeAWish brand. Here's how we compare to other brands. So some of it is very, business. But then, we want to put in some pictures and see if we can get them to cry and, that kind of thing too. So, but that's what we're seeing.
Awesome, thank you.
Thanks.
Stanley, please.
Hi, Mr. Williams. My name is Kushal. And my question is, how do you remake the experiences I've had with some of the social organizations I work with was they struggled with branding and rebranding and remaining current in their ideas. And I want to know how you kept that in MakeAWish. Like, how did you make the brand remain current and remain true to their objective and rebrand it so that it goes with time?
Right. So I think probably the short answer is that we're never really satisfied with kind of where we are. And so we deal with a lot of consultants. We have a brand team that's what they do. And so this was a change that we just made 3 years ago, where the brand was really just part of our corporate alliances team. And because most of the marketing that we did through our corporate programs. And again, this was about 3 years ago, I kind of sat down and thought, good grief, our most important asset is our brand, and yet this is kind of an appendage to our corporate program, and it's really so important. It should be a unit in and of itself. It should have its own VP that's on the senior leadership team, that it's just about the brand. And so that's what we have, and I think that that helps. So some of it is just making sure you're putting your money and your focus on, in our case, what I think is our most important asset, which is our brand.
Thank you.
Please.
Hi, you mentioned a lot of qualities and attitudes that would be extremely beneficial to someone if they adopted them as their own. And as a leader, I was wondering, how do you inspire others to care about cultivating those qualities within themselves, especially if they don't really care about doing that?
Yeah.
Can you fake it?
Yeah, you really can. Well, and I would say that's the one thing where, I was telling you earlier about being unwilling to make, hard decisions, because sometimes in the nonprofit sector, you think, well, we can change that person. We can,
Yeah.
And, some things you can't. And so I think the main thing is, in terms of being a leader in a nonprofit organization, you really better walk the values of the organization. You should do that in any organization, but you have to, people will see inconsistencies very, very quickly, and quicker than you think they will. And so I think that, that whole phrase of people join movements or they join organizations, but they leave people is really true. So the first thing is you have to walk it. But then secondly, I think you just have to realize when, I think you can do things that people will be drawn to, but if ultimately somebody doesn't want to, then they're not going to. They might fake it, but they're not. It's not going to be real. And then I think the job of the leader is to be able to find another place for them outside the organization, because especially in a nonprofit, every position counts. You can't say that. Every dollar we spend is somebody out there made a gift They could have not made a gift. They could have made it to 1.5 million other charities, but they made it to us because they believe in what we do. And so above all else, we've got an obligation to the people who support us to use those funds as best as we can. And so so we need to be, and I think we are. We're not harsh about it, but somebody really needs to buy into this thing. And if they don't, then they need to go somewhere else. So
Thank you.
I hope I answered your question.
Hello, Mr. Williams. My name is Ryan, and I was wondering what some advice that you had for somebody wanting to start their own nonprofit for something they're passionate about.
So I think my first advice would be if you really want to start, a nonprofit.
Or just starting like a nonprofit,
Yeah. I mean, the first thing would be to make sure that what you're starting really and truly is not being replicated somewhere else. I think that would be the first thing. And because if it is, the better thing is to, join forces with something that's already going and, let's figure out how to make it better. But if it's not, if it really is something new, then then I think if you're going to do it full time, again, I think what I would recommend is go work for a nonprofit first, and then try to start something. But a lot of nonprofits get started in people's spare time. They do it as a volunteer. They want to have their own career, but they want to start this thing because they're passionate about it. And so the main thing is you want to be able to draw people in. And so if you can draw people in and really focus on what's the vision for this thing, what are our values, I really think if it's the right idea, the money will take care of itself. And that might be easy for me to say, being with an organization like MakeAWish, because it's hard. I mean, it's 1.5 million charities in one country is a lot, and so it's hard to differentiate yourself, and so it's a tough job to be able to do it.
What did day one at MakeAWish look like?
Day one at MakeAWish? You mean the very first day
like
one?
when it started up.
When it started up. Yeah, so it was a group of volunteers. There was a kid, I don't know, you guys are too young for this. There are a couple of people in here that might. There was a TV show called Chips.
Yeah.
Anybody here at Chips?
Yeah.
See, yeah.
That's a
Okay,
big
guy
one.
with gray hair.
Punch.
Anybody else? Yeah, another guy with the gray hair. Okay. So
Motorcycles.
Right.
It was a great show.
Southern California.
Yeah.
Your old place.
Yeah.
So this kid had leukemia in 1980, and that was his favorite TV show. And so there was no Make-A-Wish at the time, but a group of, actually it was one person who knew that his mom and another guy knew that that was his favorite TV show, and he always dreamed that he wanted to be a highway patrolman. And so they kind of sat down and said, well, you work at the Department of Public Safety. Couldn't we kind of have a day where he could go ride on a motorcycle, ride in a car, ride in a helicopter? Maybe we could get somebody to sew a uniform, and that's kind of what they did. And so they weren't even thinking about an organization. They just wanted to help a kid. And fortunately, they were smart enough that they actually got some media to kind of film the thing, and it was on the news. Unfortunately, he passed away just a couple days later. But again, from a media standpoint, that was really big. And then I think fortunately, that small group of individuals said, "Wow, that was really special. Maybe we should do this for another kid." I mean, fortunately they did. Fortunately, they didn't just go back and say, "Well, that was nice. Now let's get back to our real work, our real job." And so thank goodness that they had the, and I don't even think they had the vision of 250,000 wishes later, but they did have the passion to want to help another kid. And I think that's ultimately what made the organization go. So I hope that answered it.
Thank you.
Please.
Hi, my name is Bryce Westbrook, and I'm a big fan of the Make-A-Wish or the My-Wish segment on SportsCenter.
Yeah,
It comes out every year.
I am too, yeah.
And so my question for you is, if you could spend a day with a professional athlete, past or present, who would it be, and what would that day consist of?
Oh man, I got to get better. I got to start thinking of some of this stuff. So I think my day would be, it would. So I still play a lot of tennis, and I think one of the players I've really admired over the years is Roger Federer, just because of how he handles himself on the court. And I don't know how many of you know who he is or watch him, but good grief, he just looks like he's out for a walk in the park, and yet he's one of the greatest, athletes. And I would love to be able to spend a day with him and maybe hit a few balls with him, and see if I could, I don't know, see if I could get a point off him. I guess he's a nice enough guy, he'd probably allow that to happen. But he's been able to, I think it's such a hard sport because so many sports are team sports, and yet it's very much an individual sport, and he's been able to excel at something for a long time, and to do it with a lot of grace, and I think that would be my wish.
He went deep in the Open this year, right?
I think he's still going, isn't he?
Is he still in it?
Just won.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Good deal. All
So
right,
that would be mine. Thanks.
Please.
Hello, my name is Vina Kim, and my question was it hard for you to leave like the safety, being an accountant, and having that as an occupation, and kind of going for a risk and going into the nonprofit world?
No, it was very easy. It was really easy. And no, what has been hard, it was very hard to leave the food bank and go to Habitat. It was very hard to leave Habitat and go to Make-A-Wish. If I ever leave Make-A-Wish, it would be really hard to go from Make-A-Wish somewhere else. I think when you've worked in an organization for 11 years, I mean, those relationships are still some of the best relationships I've ever had in my life. And you work side by side with people for a long period of time, and you see them as much as you see your neighbors, the people who your closest friends. And so that's been the hard part. Yeah, the day I left Shell was not hard. And again, it was the worst thing that could happen. The worst thing that could happen is that I would go to the food bank, I would be terrible at it, and then I would have to go back to being a mediocre accountant. And I could go with that risk. So to your point, it was not a very risky move in that case. And I really admire people who make that move later on. And so, for example, Leslie, was a senior executive at American Express and made a decision to come work for Make-A-Wish. Very, very different. She made a lot more money than a lot of us will ever make. And so that is a much riskier deal. But people do it. And I really admire people that do that. And we hire many of them at Make-A-Wish all the time, who, for a variety of reasons, and this isn't for-profit is bad and nonprofit is good. It's just, people come to different points of time in their life where they're looking for something else, and they make a decision that I'd like to do something, and it's a new industry. In some cases, it's less money, and there's their family, their kids, there's college, there's all that kind of stuff. I think that's courage to be able to make that kind of move. In my case, I was very young, and it was not very risky at all. So,
Thank you.
you bet.
And just to be clear, Shell's a fine place to work, but accounting was not for you.
That's right.
Okay.
And Shell was actually Shell was a great place. In fact, one of the policies they had, I will tell you this, two things that they did that still serve me well today. They had something called a desk audit, where literally your supervisor would come into your office and they would go through your desk and your files to see how you now, I don't know that we could do that today. Somebody would be sued. But the neat thing about that was that you had to explain how you did things, and you had to be organized and all that kind of stuff. The second one was, and I get teased about this a little bit at Make-A-Wish, is that you also have a clean desk policy, which meant that at the end of the day, there could be nothing on your desk, which was it was a security thing. Right, and so I have a very clean desk, and people don't think I do any work because there's never a paper, or if there are, it's neatly stacked on one side. But that was something that early on, being organized was really drilled in, and I would say that was a good thing about the accounting side and working at Shell.
Yeah.
Was that was important.
Got it. Please.
Hi, my name is Ronnie, and I just wanted to see where you're going to take Make-A-Wish in 5 to 10 years, what's your goals and stuff, other than, of course, expanding the Make-A-Wish Foundation, which is already obviously really big. So.
Yep. So it's estimated in the United States there are 27,000 kids that are diagnosed with a life-threatening medical condition. This year we'll grant the wishes of about 14,300 or so. So in rough numbers, for every child we're helping, there's one out there that we're not. We have a very simple mission, and people understand it. And so really for the next 5 or 10 years, the vision is that we don't need to be starting camps for kids that have cancer. There are other groups that do that. We don't have to grant wishes for adults. There are groups that do that. There are a lot of other things that are helping sick kids, and a lot of other organizations, and they're great organizations. We're only helping half the kids who are eligible. So our vision is, let's close that gap. So we're a $270 million organization. That means we'd have to be roughly a $520 million organization, 550. Well, what does it take to do that? And so it is bigger, but one of the advantages of MakeAWish is that we have a simple mission. People get it. And now, it's a complicated work to get all this stuff done, but the vision and the mission are simple. And as long as we have that kind of gap, our short-term goal should be to fill it. I think that's what we need to focus on. And so that will be what all our plans will be over the next 5 to 10 years.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Please.
Hi, I'm Victoria, and I was wondering how much does the average wish cost to grant, and also when you bring celebrities in, like when you had that little girl go to Beyonce or something, do they work with you or do they make them pay you for it and stuff? But you pay them, yeah.
So the average cost of a wish is about $7,500. So some are more, some are less. You know, we have World Cup wishes this past year. You know, think about traveling a family of 4 to Brazil, even getting frequent flyer miles donated and deals with hotels and ticket packages. You know, there'll be more. So on average, it's about $7,500. In terms of the celebrities, did you say are they easy to work with?
Well, if they like make you pay them in a way, like when the girl went with Beyonce.
So we don't pay for their time. Some of them are easier to work with than others, but they're celebrities, and so we kind of understand that. But no, we don't pay them to grant the wish of a child. So that's yeah, we don't do that.
Perfect. Great.
Thank you.
You bet.
We have time for one more question.
There we go.
Hi, Mr. Williams.
Hey.
Hello. My name is Marissa Muir, and I spent my summer interning for MakeAWish.
Yay.
And it was El Paso, my hometown.
Oh, fantastic.
And it was truly a wonderful experience. One thing I noticed, though, when I was interning with the organization was when I was telling my friends and my family what I was doing, most of them, I guess, kind of connected MakeAWish with The Fault in Our Stars.
Right.
And so I was kind of wondering, how did you all either utilize The Fault in Our Stars? What kind of plan once the movie came out or the book came out? And how did you approach it? Even though it wasn't the same organization, it kind of almost spread, I guess, awareness.
It did, and they, you know,
what's the background of The Fault in Our Stars?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So for those of you who haven't seen the movie, Fault in Our Stars is about two kids, two young, older teenagers that have cancer, and they are, without telling you too much, but there's a wish granted involved in the story, but it's through another organization they call the Genie, and so anyway, a wish is granted. So we did not have any involvement with the movie. The producers did not approach us. The author didn't, and and a lot of times that's not unusual. So, if they were going to involve us, then you're talking about the use of our marks. You're talking about, if you're going to do that, then all of a sudden we get involved in the scripts and approvals and stuff like that. And frankly, if you don't have to, if I were a movie producer, I wouldn't either. And so they chose to tell the story just, about a wish being granted through a fictitious organization. And that was perfectly fine. So I think the second part to your question is what impact has there been?
Mm-hmm.
And we have certainly, one of the things that I do is I get an email every day of 2 people that have made a gift to Make-A-Wish. And so I'll just call. Most of the time I'm leaving a message, but sometimes I'll have a conversation. And it's just a thank you. That's it. It's just saying, I saw that you made a gift. I just want you to know that your gift is appreciated. You have a lot of choices, and you chose Make-A-Wish, and just want to thank you for your gift. And so the last time that I did that, if I do get a person, then I'll say, could you tell me what motivated you to make your gift? And the very last conversation I had was with a person who said, well, I saw that wonderful movie, A Fault in Our Stars, and I thought, this is what you guys do, and I just wanted to make a gift. And so I am sure, just like the Bat Kid Wish that took place, I'm sure that there were people that they saw it, just like the ESPN My Wish series, and this is why organizations spend time promoting their brand and promoting their organization, is because, you know, people see it, and it's very easy today to be able to make a gift. It's hard to be able to trace it all back. So somebody, you know, they watch a movie, they've got their iPhone, heck, you can make a gift, and you're done. Well, what was it that motivated you to make that gift? And will the organization ever know unless there's, you know, some kind of personal conversation? Right. So anyway, I'm sure that there were other folks. I'm sure that's not the only person that saw that movie and made a gift.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
I'd like to call Mandy back to the stage to conclude the program.
Thank you very much, Dean Gilligan and Mr. Williams, for taking time out of your busy schedule to speak with our students. I know that we will be able to take your lessons and turn them into advice that we can take into our own lives. As a token of our appreciation, the Undergraduate Business Council would like to present Mr. Williams with a personalized Stetson cowboy hat in recognition of your participation in the VIP distinction.
Wow, this is fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much. Absolutely. With the hat on?
Sure.
All right. Oh, yeah, right. Got to get it right.